I'm going to ask a unanimous consent to submit for the record two letters dated September 6, 2022, in opposition to S 2736, the Recognizing Protection of Motor Sports Act of 2021 as written, without objection. All right. Again, to our witnesses, thank you all for joining us. I mentioned right at the beginning of my comments that I spoke of the what we're seeing in terms of weather across the country, floods, record floods. Not far from where my mom and sister live in eastern Kentucky, we've seen sea level rise all over the coast of our country. We've seen droughts, record droughts. In terms of agriculture, we've seen a lot of places where crops just aren't growing. And it's not just in America, but it's across the planet. One of if you look at the major cause of what's creating this, it's too much carbon dioxide in the air. And if you look at where does it come from? About 30% of the carbon dioxide emissions in this country come from the vehicles we drive, our cars, trucks, vans, motorcycles. I say that as a former motorcycle owner. But the second greatest source is power plants. About 25% of the emissions come from power plants, and about another 20% from manufacturing operations. Think cement plants, think steel mills, and that sort of thing. This is a serious matter, and the amount of damage, property damage, is in the it's not just millions, it's not just tens of millions, hundreds of millions. It's in the billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, like within this year. So this is serious. This is a serious matter. We got to make sure that we're looking at every significant source of carbon emissions, and that's why this is so critical. Mr. Walk, as you know, emissions from our transportation sector are a large contributor to the climate crisis and to smog, to air toxic pollutions that are dangerous to our health. I believe we can all agree that drivers should face a Clean Air Act liability for vehicles that are used solely for organized racing. EPA has never gone after, let me say that, EPA has never gone after race car drivers through its Clean Air Act enforcement actions and does not intend to do so in the future. But having said that, EPA is finding massive Clean Air Act violations as aftermarket parts are installed on cars and trucks that are used daily on streets in our communities. That means more asthma attacks, more lung disease, more mortalities, and somebody needs to be held accountable for these results. My question is this, Mr. Walk, what is your advice to us as lawmakers about who should be held accountable and how should we do that? Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Senator Carper. Well, we should not be holding race car drivers accountable. The minimal amounts of air pollution that occur on weekend driving racing is not the air pollution problem. It's the defeat device industry that is the problem. I understand and appreciate Mr. Brown's desire for certainty for himself, for his family, and race car drivers, and I think that's something that Congress can address through a narrowly tailored amendment. The problem is that the bill limits the ability of EPA to enforce against businesses who should have known their defeat devices were not being used on race cars. Now, I don't have his driving skills. I really wish I did. I have much less significant skills as a Clean Air Act attorney for 30 years. And if I were an attorney for the defeat device industry, I'd write language like this, because it says, no, we shouldn't ask whether people knew or should have known that their devices were not used on race cars. We should ask solely, what was your purpose in selling this? Well, they're going to say their purpose was to sell it to race car drivers. But as these enforcement cases have shown by the Trump administration and the Biden administration, they aren't able to prove those facts in actual cases. So we have hundreds of thousands of tons of illegal vehicles, hundreds of thousands of tons of illegal pollution, and it's my professional opinion that this bill would make things worse.
All right, thank you. I have another question. I want to go back to Dr. Mosley. I want to turn to wildfire events. And best climate science tells us that the conditions that are driving wildfires, including extreme heat and drought that I mentioned earlier, are getting worse, not better. This summer, at least 1/3 of Americans were under a heat advisory. 1/3. And tens of millions have experienced extreme temperatures surpassing 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's in a bunch of places where they don't even have air conditioning. At the same time, the historic extreme drought affecting the West is worsening and spreading east. It shows, as of yesterday, there are, I'm told, 69 active wildfires across our country, some as big as my state. And in July, that number was at least 82 wildfires burning at one time. My question, Dr. Mosley, is briefly tell us, do these startling figures reflect the reality you see on the ground? And in other words, do you agree that wildfires are becoming more frequent and intense due to climate change?
I think the scientific evidence is fairly clear that we have a number of drivers, not the least of which is climate change, that is increasing the size and severity of wildfire. As you say, we're seeing hotter, drier climates, particularly in the arid West. I think it's also important for folks to realize that we see a lot of wildfire on CNN or on cable news, but there is in fact a very broad array of what wildfire is and where it occurs. In this fiscal year to date, we've had more than 6 million acres burned in wildfire. Half of that occurred in the state of Alaska. 1 million of it occurred in the southern United States. So we have wildfire really everywhere, and what we really need to be thinking about as wildfire continues to grow, and I think the scientific evidence is also clear that we are not yet in a new normal. It feels like a new normal, but it is going to continue to grow for some time, even with our best climate mitigation measures. That more and more folks are going to need to be prepared for and learn to live with fire and fire smoke, and that's why adaptation, such as contemplated in the bills here, is so important.